The doors to the Hargrove Estate ballroom were wide open when I arrived. White roses lined the entrance. Soft golden light poured across the marble floors. Everything looked exactly the way I had imagined it because I was the one who made it happen. I smoothed my dress and stepped forward with a quiet smile. I was happy for Sean. I really was. Even after all the tension between us over the past year, I wanted his wedding day to be everything he had hoped for. That was when Holly stepped directly in front of me. She was not smiling. Her eyes were sharp and cold, the kind of cold that does not happen by accident. She looked past me toward the security guard standing near the entrance and gave one slow nod. "She's not on the list," Holly said quietly. "Please escort her out." The guard moved toward me before I could say a single word. People nearby turned to look. I recognized faces, cousins, old family friends, people I had shared holidays with for years. They all stared. I turned to find Sean. He was standing 10 feet away. He saw everything. He said nothing. My parents stood behind him. They looked away. The heavy doors swung shut in my face. "My name is Marvas. I am 31 years old. I work as a financial consultant, I have a clean apartment, and I have always had a very clear head." I stood on the stone steps outside the Hargrove Estate, still holding my small evening purse, still wearing the pale blue dress I had picked out 3 weeks ago for this exact night. My hands were trembling slightly, not from cold, from disbelief. I had paid for the venue rental. I had signed the catering contract. I had approved the florals, the lighting, the 4-tier cake, and the live band. I had wired the deposit for the honeymoon suite without being asked twice. I had even covered the full cost of Holly's dress when she said it was beyond their budget. I had done all of it quietly, without asking for control, without demanding gratitude. I had only wanted one thing in return, to be there. And now I was standing outside in the dark. I took a slow breath and looked down at my phone. The screen glowed softly in my palm. I thought about calling a friend to vent, to cry, to release some of the heat building in my chest. Instead, something inside me went completely still. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a very different name. The coordinator's name was Patrice. She had been calm and professional from the very first meeting. We had worked together for 3 months planning every detail of this reception down to the color of the napkin rings. She picked up on the second ring. "Patrice," I said evenly, "this is Maravas. I need to let you know that I have been removed from the event." A short pause. "I'm sorry, removed?" "Yes. The bride had security escort me off the property. I am no longer inside the venue." I kept my voice flat and steady. "Per the terms of our signed contract, specifically Clause 14, I am requesting that you proceed accordingly." A longer pause this time. I could hear soft background sounds on her end, low music, the faint clink of glasses, the easy hum of a reception still moving smoothly. "Ms. Voss," Patrice said carefully, "are you certain you want to proceed with that clause?" I looked at the closed doors in front of me. I thought about Sean standing 10 feet away watching it happen, doing absolutely nothing. "Yes," I said. "I am certain." "Understood," she replied quietly. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my purse. Then I waited. I did not have to wait long. It started with the music. One moment it was flowing out through the ballroom walls. Something slow and warm. The kind of song that makes a room feel alive and easy. And then, without any warning, it stopped. Not a natural pause between songs. Not a smooth transition. Just a sudden flat silence that had no business being there. I could see inside through the tall glass panels beside the entrance doors. Guests near the front were turning their heads, looking toward the stage with confused expressions. A few people laughed nervously, assuming it was a small technical problem that would sort itself out in seconds. But I knew better. Clause 14 of every vendor contract I had signed stated one clear condition. If the primary account holder was removed or banned from the event without their written consent, any active service could be suspended pending a direct review call with me personally. I had included that clause after doing careful research. Patrice had not questioned it. She had simply added it to the paperwork and moved on. The silence inside the ballroom stretched on. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Someone near the glass panels looked out and met my eyes. I did not look away. People who have never been the responsible one in a family do not understand how quietly it creeps up on you. Start small. A borrowed $100 one month. A cosign form the next. A phone call that begins with "I hate to ask" and ends with your account number. Then one day you look up and realize you have become the foundation that everyone else stands on without once stopping to think about it. I started helping my family financially at 24. Sean was 21 and had just dropped out of a business program with no backup plan. My parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage. I had the only real income in the house, so I helped. Felt like the right thing to do. Over the next 6 years I paid off my parents' car loan. I funded Sean's first business idea. A small landscaping company that lasted 8 months before he grew bored and walked away from it. I covered 2 rounds of capital for a second venture that never got off the ground. I sent money when asked and sometimes before anyone said a word, because I could see the problem forming before they did. No one ever thanked me deeply. They thanked me the way people thank you when they expect to be asking again soon. I met Holly for the first time at a Sunday family dinner, about 8 months before the wedding. She was easy to talk to and quick to laugh, and she made Sean smile in a way I had not seen from him in a long time. I liked her immediately. I told myself that was a good sign. After the meal, while Sean helped my mother clear the kitchen, Holly sat across from me at the dining table. She smiled. It was smooth and practiced, the kind of smile that takes effort to look effortless. "You must be so proud of Sean," she said warmly. "He talks about you constantly." "We're close," I said. She tilted her head to one side. "It must be nice, being the one everyone depends on." I smiled back and said something polite, but the words stayed with me on the drive home. It did not sound like admiration. It did not even sound neutral. It sounded like she was measuring something, like she was quietly calculating how much space I occupied in Sean's life, and whether that space bothered her. I told myself I was reading too far into it, but the feeling did not leave me. 20 minutes had passed since the music stopped. Through the glass panels I could see movement inside, waitstaff moving quietly between tables, guests shifting in their seats, a low current of confusion spreading through the room. I made my second call. This one was to Lou, the catering manager. He was a calm and organized man who had managed the food and service team from the very beginning of our planning. He answered on the first ring. "Lou, it's Maravas. I need to revoke payment authorization on the active service contract. Breach conditions have been met on my end. The relevant clause is Section 9 of our agreement." A brief pause. "Understood, Ms. Voss. I'll need to notify my team right away." "Of course," I said. "Thank you, Lou." I hung up. My hands were completely still now. That surprised me. I had imagined that if something like this ever happened, if people I had sacrificed for publicly humiliated me, I would fall apart. I had assumed I would cry or rage or feel the ground disappear beneath me. But I did not feel broken. I felt precise, focused. Like every move I was about to make had already been carefully thought through, which, as it turned out, it had. The change inside the ballroom happened quickly after that. Through the glass panels, I watched the waitstaff slow to a stop. A table near the center that had been mid-service was quietly stepped away from. A server set down a bread basket, spoke briefly to her colleague, and moved off the floor entirely. The long buffet table near the far wall, which I had seen fully loaded during setup that afternoon, was being covered one tray at a time. The guests noticed. First came the confused looks, people glancing around to find some explanation. Then the murmuring started. A woman in a red dress flagged down a passing server. Whatever she was told made her expression shift from mild confusion to clear irritation. She leaned over to the man beside her and repeated it. At the head table, Holly was still smiling, but the smile had changed. It was tight now, held in place by effort rather than feeling. Sean was beside her, leaning over to speak quietly to someone at the next table. He had not looked toward the entrance doors in several minutes. I stood in the cool evening air outside and watched my money stop moving through that room. It was the strangest kind of power I had ever felt. For months before the wedding, Holly sent me a link with no message attached. I clicked it and found myself on a bridal boutique page. A custom-made gown, floor-length, with delicate beading along the neckline and small pearl buttons down the back. The price was listed at the bottom, $3,200. Called Sean that evening. He laughed in that slightly awkward way he had when he needed something but did not want to be the one to ask. He said Holly had fallen in love with the dress but that it was a little outside their budget right now. He did not ask me directly. He never did. That was how our family worked. No one made a direct request. They simply left a silence and waited for me to fill it. I filled it. I paid for the dress the following morning without making it into anything. Holly left me a voice message that same afternoon. Her voice bright and warm. Mara, I cannot believe you did this. I am going to look so beautiful. You are honestly the best. She was wearing that dress tonight. I had watched the ballroom doors close directly in front of it. My brother and I used to be genuinely close, not just polite at Christmas close, but the kind of close where you actually say the real things. When we were teenagers, Sean and I would sit on the back porch until midnight and talk about what we wanted our lives to look like. He wanted to build something real. He wanted to be the kind of man that people respected without being asked to. I believed every word of it. I believed in him for a very long time. Somewhere along the way, though, believing in him turned into paying for him. And paying for him turned into being expected. Over the past year I had felt the shift growing. Sean called less. When we did speak, the conversations were shorter and more surface level. He seemed uncomfortable around me, like my presence reminded him of a debt he had chosen not to think about. I had wondered sometimes whether Holly had been saying things, planting quiet doubts, reframing my generosity as something darker. But even if she had, Sean had always known exactly who I was. He had always known what I had given up without complaint. And tonight, when I needed him to say one single word, he had chosen silence. That was the part that stung the deepest. I was still standing outside when I saw it, a brief, noticeable change in the quality of light coming through the ballroom windows. Not full darkness, just a dimming. Like the room had taken one tired breath and not fully recovered from it. Inside, the venue manager, a tall, composed woman named Carol who I had dealt with throughout the entire planning process, was making her way across the floor toward the head table. Her pace was quick but controlled. She bent down to speak quietly and directly to Holly. Whatever Carol said, Holly's reaction was immediate. Her posture stiffened. She turned sharply toward Carol, then glanced around the room as if checking how many people had noticed. She kept her voice low, but her expression made the tone clear. Sean leaned in from beside her. Holly placed one hand firmly on his arm without looking at him. The gesture said plainly, "Stay out of this." Carol straightened, gave a short nod and walked away. Seconds later the lights dropped another shade. Not off. Not dramatic. Just enough to shift the atmosphere from magical to something else entirely. Less like a celebration. More like a building slowly running out of reasons to keep going. Two women stepped outside for some air. They stopped just a few feet to my left. They were close enough that I could hear everything without any effort. "Did the music stop again?" the first woman asked. "I think so," the second one replied quietly. "And the food, did you notice? They covered the whole buffet. Something has clearly gone wrong with the venue." A pause. Then the first woman dropped her voice slightly. "I heard something earlier. Someone said a woman was escorted out at the front entrance." Escorted out? During the reception? By security apparently. Right at the beginning. Who on earth would they? That's the thing. The first woman's voice was careful, uncertain. "I heard she funded the whole thing. The venue, the catering, all of it. Apparently almost everything in that room was paid for by her." The second woman went quiet for a long moment. Then softly, "That doesn't make any sense. Why would they remove the person who paid for everything?" No one answered that question out loud. But I watched it land on both of them slowly, the way a true thing tends to land, with quiet, undeniable weight. The story was already slipping out of Holly's hands. 6 weeks before the wedding, I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off some paperwork my father needed. The back door was unlocked the way it always was on weekday afternoons. I let myself in and called out a hello. No one answered. I set the folder on the kitchen counter and was about to leave when I heard Holly's voice drifting in from the living room. She was on the phone. "She wants to control everything," Holly was saying. "She always has. The wedding, the finances, Sean. She acts like he belongs to her." A short pause while the other person responded. "I know it sounds harsh, but you haven't seen it from where I'm standing." Another pause. Then, I'm just trying to protect my marriage before it even starts. I need his family to understand that she is toxic. I stood completely still in the kitchen doorway. Holly had not heard me come in. I backed out quietly, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. I realized in that moment that every conversation Holly had ever had with my family had not been about getting to know them. It had been preparation. She had been building a case against me for months before she ever made her move. The next afternoon I called my mother. I told her exactly what I had overheard. I stayed calm and chose my words carefully. I repeated Holly's phrases back almost word for word. Toxic, control, protect my marriage, because I wanted my mother to understand that this was not a feeling or a suspicion. This was something Holly had said, clearly and deliberately, to someone on the phone. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mara, Holly is just nervous. She's a new bride. New brides feel protective. She is telling people I am trying to control Sean," I said. "Well," my mother replied gently, "you do have strong opinions about how things should be done." I could not fully believe what I was hearing. "Mom, I have funded his businesses twice. I have covered your mortgage payments. I am paying for this entire wedding because you told me it would keep the peace. And now I am being described as the problem in this family." A long pause. Then softly, "Just keep the peace, Mara. Please. For Sean's sake." That phrase, keep the peace. I had heard it my whole life. It always meant the same thing. Swallow the hurt, stay quiet, and make sure everyone else stays comfortable. I said goodbye and ended the call. The band had started playing again about 20 minutes after the first silence. Someone inside must have convinced them to try once more. But it did not last. Roughly 45 minutes after my first call to Patrice, the music stopped for the second time. This time was different. Through the glass panels I watched the musicians set their instruments down, not in a pause, but in the slow and deliberate way of people who had decided they were done. The guitarist unclipped his strap and laid it carefully across his case. The drummer stood and stretched. The keyboard player started zipping up his bag. There was no announcement. No explanation offered over a microphone. The band simply packed their things and walked off the stage in a quiet single file, like workers clocking out at the end of a shift. The room watched them go. For a moment the entire ballroom was completely silent. Then the murmuring grew again, louder this time and with a sharper edge to it. I could see people checking their phones, leaning across tables, scanning the exits. The energy inside had shifted entirely. It no longer felt like a wedding reception. It felt like a place where something had gone wrong, and nobody in charge was telling the truth about it. The silence was heavy and it kept spreading. Through the glass, the scene inside had become visibly tense. Holly was no longer at the head table. I spotted her near the back of the room, speaking rapidly to two members of the catering staff. Her hands were moving with short, sharp gestures. Whatever she was asking, both staff members were slowly shaking their heads. Sean was on his feet now, pacing a tight line near the empty stage. He had his phone pressed to his ear. I watched him hang up, look around the room with a lost expression, and immediately dial again. The second call did not seem to connect either. He lowered the phone and dragged his hand through his hair. My parents were seated stiffly at their table. My father was staring down at the tablecloth. My mother was watching Holly from across the room with an expression I could not quite read from where I stood outside. Carol, the venue manager, appeared again and walked directly toward Sean. She spoke to him for less than a minute. His face changed completely as she talked. Then he looked toward the entrance doors. His eyes found mine through the glass. For the first time all night I saw something honest on his face. It was fear. The entrance doors swung open hard. Sean came out still in his wedding suit, jaw tight, trying to hold himself together. He stopped a few feet in front of me and looked at me like I had done something unforgivable. "Mara," he said. "Fix this." Not hello. Not are you okay. Not I am sorry for what happened. Fix this. I looked at him without speaking. He took my silence as an opening. "Whatever you're doing with the vendors, stop it. This is my wedding. You don't get to just, this is insane. Call them and stop it right now." I kept my voice very quiet. "How did I end up outside, Sean?" He blinked. "Look, Holly made a bad call. She panicked. We can sit down and talk about this tomorrow." How did I end up outside? I said again. He rubbed a hand across his jaw. It was a misunderstanding. Things got out of hand. Security walked me through the entrance in front of guests, I said carefully. You were standing 10 feet away. You watched the whole thing. Was that a misunderstanding too? Sean did not answer. He looked back at the doors, then back at me. The certainty had drained out of his face. Just fix it, he said again. Much quieter this time, almost like asking. I said nothing. Sean did not leave. He stood there and waited for me to give in the way I always had before. I could see the expectation in his posture, the deep, comfortable assumption that I would eventually step forward, smooth things over, and make the discomfort go away for everyone. It was not even something he was consciously doing. It was simply how things had always worked between us. I let the silence sit for a while. Then I said, I want you to answer one question honestly. He looked up. Was this Holly's decision alone? Or did you know she planned to do this? He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked away. That was my answer. Sean, I said calmly, you watched them walk me out. You stood right there. You did not say a single word. I paused for a moment. The venue, the catering, the lighting, the flowers, the band, Holly's dress. I paid for every single thing inside that building. And you let her throw me out of it. He finally spoke. It's her wedding too, Mara. I nodded very slowly. I know, I said. That is exactly what I needed to hear. I stepped back. He looked confused. You're not going to fix it? He asked. No, I said. I'm not. Took very little time after that. Without music, without food service, without the warm and elegant lighting that had made the space feel like something worth celebrating, the ballroom had become just a large and expensive-looking room where people were sitting in quiet confusion with empty glasses and no clear reason to stay. The first guests to leave were a couple near the back, an older pair who gathered their coats without fuss and slipped out through a side door. Then a table of 4 near the center began saying their goodbyes, hugging the people around them, and walking out at an unhurried pace. The pace of people who had simply decided the evening was over. When a third group headed toward the exit, the departures became visible enough that the remaining guests were taking notice. A few people pulled out their phones. One woman near the glass panels looked outside and spotted me standing alone in the evening air. She said something to the person beside her. The whispers I had heard earlier had grown into open conversations. The story was moving through the room on its own now, without anyone pushing it. Holly had wanted to erase me from this night entirely. Instead, my absence had become the only thing anyone was talking about. The entrance doors opened and Holly came out. She was still wearing the dress, my $3,000 dress, and she was holding the skirt slightly off the ground so she could move faster. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were wet, but not from sadness, from pure hot fury. She stopped directly in front of me. You need to stop this right now, she said. You are ruining my wedding. I kept my voice completely steady. I am standing outside, Holly. You put me here. You're doing this on purpose. Her voice cracked at the edges. You have always needed to be the most important person in every room. You could never just let Sean have something that wasn't about you. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment. I paid for the venue, I said simply. The catering, the florals, the band, the cake, your dress. I tilted my head slightly. And you had me removed from the building. Holly stared at me. Something shifted behind her eyes. You didn't remove a jealous sister, I said. You removed the host. Everything falling apart in there right now. That is the direct consequence of that decision. She had no answer for that. Her mouth opened and closed once. Then she turned and went back inside without another word. Carol, the venue manager, stepped outside a few minutes after Holly disappeared back through the doors. She glanced briefly in the direction Holly had gone, then turned to face me with a composed and professional expression. Ms. Voss, she said, I want to be fully transparent with you about where things stand legally. I nodded and waited. The primary contracts governing this event, the venue rental, all on-site services, and the full vendor coordination, were signed exclusively in your name, with your authorization. When you notified us of your removal from the premises, our legal team reviewed the situation and confirmed that the breach clause in Section 14 of your agreement was validly triggered. She folded her hands neatly in front of her. We have been proceeding in accordance with that clause. Behind Carol, I could hear Sean's voice rising inside the ballroom, demanding to speak with someone in charge. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway. Can someone please tell me exactly what is happening in there? He said. Carol turned to face him calmly. Mr. Voss, the contracts governing tonight's services are held solely by your sister. Without her active authorization, we are not legally able to continue full operations for this event. Sean looked at me. You planned this, he said. No, I replied quietly. You did. Carol went back inside, and the rest of it unfolded quickly. The venue made a brief formal announcement that the event would be concluding ahead of the scheduled time. The remaining food service was cleared from the tables. The stage stayed empty. The lighting shifted to a flat, practical brightness, the kind used during cleanup, not celebration. Guests gathered their belongings in small, confused clusters. Some stopped to say proper goodbyes to the people around them. Others simply left. I watched through the glass as the reception I had spent months and tens of thousands of dollars building came apart in the space of about 20 minutes. The flower arrangements were still standing on the tables. The place settings were still laid out perfectly. The 4-tier vanilla cake with hand-piped flowers that I had personally approved sat completely untouched on its display stand near the back of the room. Holly had not even cut it. Everything was still in its place. It was just empty. Sean stood in the center of the ballroom floor and watched his guests leave. Holly was beside him, her hand in his, but neither of them spoke. They were surrounded by every beautiful thing I had paid for, and none of it was working anymore. That was the image I took home with me that night. I did not call anyone when I got home. I drove back to my apartment, changed out of the blue dress, and sat at my kitchen table in the quiet for a long time. I was not crying. I was not raging. I was simply letting everything settle. The messages started arriving the next morning. Some were from cousins expressing shock and concern. A few were from family friends who had pieced the story together on their own. One came from a woman I barely knew who had been told by someone who had been told by someone else. The message that I kept returning to was from my Aunt Brenda. She had been at the wedding. She had seen me escorted out with her own eyes. I didn't say anything in the moment because I genuinely did not understand what I was watching, she wrote. But I have been awake most of the night thinking about it. What they did to you was deeply wrong. And honestly, what they have been doing for a long time was wrong. I am sorry that I did not see it clearly before now. I sat with that message for a long time. Then I went back and read the others. Most of them said the same thing in different words. They had not known the full picture before. Now that they did, the picture was impossible to misread. I blocked Sean's number 4 days after the wedding. He had called twice and left 2 voicemails. The first one was still defensive, still shaped around the idea that I had done something wrong by enforcing my own contracts. The second was softer and included the word sorry, but only after a long explanation of how difficult the situation had been for him personally. I did not want an explanation. I did not want a carefully negotiated peace where I was expected to accept half an apology and move on as if nothing had been broken. I blocked Holly as well. And for a period of time I placed some distance between myself and my parents too, not because I hated them, but because I needed space that they had never once thought to offer me on their own. I did not release any kind of statement. I did not contact relatives to share my version of events. I did not need to. True stories have a way of spreading without being pushed, and this one had already done exactly that. What I did instead was sit down one quiet evening with a plain notepad and write out, for the first time in my adult life, a list of the things I actually wanted. Not what I owed. Not what they needed from me. What I wanted. It was a shorter list than I expected, but every single thing on it was mine. 3 months later, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment. I set the table for 7, a few close friends, my Aunt Brenda, and 2 colleagues I had grown genuinely fond of over the past couple of years. Nothing elaborate. Candles, good food I had actually cooked myself, music I chose because I liked it. No pressure to perform. No one to impress. No cost I would quietly absorb and never mention again. My therapist had said something during one of our early sessions that I kept coming back to. The cost of keeping peace is almost always paid by only one person. She was right. I had been paying that cost my entire adult life, and in ways that went far deeper than money. I did not know yet what my relationship with Sean would eventually look like, or whether my parents would ever fully understand what they had allowed to happen. Those were questions I had stopped needing to answer urgently. They would work themselves out in time or they would not. Either way, the outcome no longer controlled how I felt about myself. What I knew for certain was this. Everyone sitting at my table that night had never once asked me to make myself smaller. They had never treated my generosity as something they were owed. I raised my glass. Not for a speech. Just because it felt right. For the first time in a very long time, I was sitting in a room I had chosen, surrounded by people who had chosen me back. That was enough. That was everything.